I am the process, he snapped, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to rattle the cheap glass water carafe. I blinked once, just once. Brent, the CEO's smug little son-in-law, wasn't even looking at me. He was looking past me like I was a PowerPoint slide he didn't ask for. The room went silent except for the dull humming of the ceiling fan and the uncomfortable shuffle of someone's pen rolling off the table and clinking against the laminate floor. That was the first 30 minutes of day one. Brent Mayfield, Director of Strategic Procurement. A job title that meant nothing, created out of thin air, stapled to a man who'd never filed a purchase order in his life. A man who once asked in front of 6 senior managers what net 30 meant. A man who walked in with gelled hair, cufflinks, and zero comprehension of how Brinwell systems actually ran. He was the kind of man who called himself a disruptor while misspelling logistics in a Slack channel, who used words like synergy and compression rates interchangeably, like it made him sound more competent. Brent had been at Brinwell for exactly 5 business hours, and already I knew this man was going to tank something, and I'd be the one on cleanup duty. Pamela, let's be real, he said, turning to me with a sneer stretched so wide I could practically smell his cologne over the Ethernet cables. We don't need to keep doing this. Checklist theater. This, legacy clog, checklist theater. That was what he called vendor vetting. That was what he called the protocols I'd built over 13 years to protect this company from signing contracts with ghost vendors and glorified shell companies. That was what he called compliance. Everyone else in the room looked down at their laptops. No one said a word. They didn't have to. The CEO had made it very clear in his New Year's address. Brinwell's future lies in bold thinking and family-driven trust. Translation: Brent could eat a kitten in the cafeteria, and HR would just ask if he needed a bib. I folded my hands and spoke with a tone I reserve for toddlers and tyrants. We're required to keep procedural logs for SOC2 review, especially for procurement over $500,000. It's not optional, Brent, it's policy. He leaned back in his chair, smirking like a game show contestant who just guessed the wrong letter on the board but still thought he was winning. Well then, Pamela, update the policy. I'm not here to do busy work, and that was it. That was the exact moment I knew. He wasn't just clueless, he was dangerous. Brent was the type who believed ignorance was a form of leadership, who thought the wheel needed reinventing every Monday morning. And worse, he was insulated by nepotism so thick, I could have drilled through concrete faster. I said nothing. I just nodded calmly and made a mental note to review our SOC2 folder permissions after the meeting. When the call ended, I stayed back in the conference room. Just me, my coffee, and the stale afterscent of whatever Brent had marinated in that morning. I opened my laptop, created a new folder on our internal server, and labeled it something boring, Q4 procurement notes internal. Then I dragged in the meeting recording. Yes, I recorded it. I always record internal vendor strategy meetings. It's company policy. One Brent didn't bother to read. I opened Outlook and typed out the meeting summary. I included bullet points. Brent's directives, the new vendor targets, his timeline for streamlined onboarding that somehow skipped every safeguard we had in place. I quoted him directly, I am the process. I kept my tone professional, neutral, cold. Then I BCC'd myself on the email, twice. Once to my main inbox. Once to a little address I keep for clean archives, just in case someone tries to pull a fast one with deleted threads. I also forwarded it to the SOC2 compliance folder, where every keystroke is timestamped, versioned, and independently backed up. Brent probably didn't even know it existed. He would soon. I closed my laptop, exhaled slowly, and went back to my desk. My phone buzzed with a message from a colleague. Yikes, that guy's a real piece of work. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened up the procurement protocol PDF, 78 pages, written by me and vetted by legal 2 years ago, approved by the board, locked down with digital signatures. I scrolled to paragraph 3, section B. All vendor contracts exceeding $500,000 must include documented third-party verification, financial health analysis, and signed attestation by the procurement officer. Any deviation from this protocol must be accompanied by a compliance deviation log, approved by legal, and co-signed by the Director of Operations. I highlighted it, and I looked at my own name in the footer. And I smiled, not because I felt vindicated, not because I thought I'd won. I smiled because I knew how this would end, and it wouldn't be with Brent in charge. 2 weeks later, Brent steamrolled into my office like he was auditioning for a perfume ad called Entitlement by Nepo. He dropped a folder on my desk. I say folder, but it was really just 2 stapled PDFs, both screenshots, one with typos, and announced JX Solutions is our new backend infrastructure vendor. We're pushing the contract by Friday. I didn't even look up right away. I just stared at the corner of the page where he'd scribbled $2.5 M flat. No BS in red Sharpie. Because why not make procurement look like a bar tab? Brent, I said slowly, calmly, like I was trying not to spook a raccoon in my kitchen, JX Solutions hasn't gone through review. You need third-party financials, cybersecurity posture, liability insurance. We don't need any of that, he cut in. They're tight with me. Startup out of Austin, very agile, they don't play games. Neither do auditors, I replied. He scoffed, perched himself on the edge of my desk like we were in some rom-com where he was the misunderstood maverick, and I was the uptight librarian about to fall for his charm. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. Pamela, he said, dragging out my name like it was the punchline of a joke only he found funny, you're still operating from a place of fear. We're not that kind of company anymore. Legacy protocols are just corporate anxiety in a trench coat. We're streamlined now. I looked him dead in the eye and said, we're SOC2 obligated. And then he laughed. It wasn't just a chuckle, it was a full-bodied, smug little heh-heh, like he'd caught me quoting scripture in a strip club. Oh, come on, he said, waving it off like I'd mentioned some ancient relic. SOC2 is just a sticker, Pam. They check a few boxes, ask a few questions, and go home. As long as everything looks good, we're golden. I'll make a deck, put a few logos on a slide. Boom, compliance theater, right? And just like that, something in me snapped, not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet little click inside my skull, the sound of trust breaking, the sound of a rope fraying in slow motion. He wasn't just reckless. He was dangerous. A man with a $2.5 million checkbook, no experience, and the emotional maturity of a waffle iron. Worse, he had the ear of the CEO and the ego of someone who thought governance was optional, and receipts were just bad vibes. I stood up, not to argue. I just needed him out of my office before I said something that would get me walked out by security. I'll note it in the workflow tracker, I said. Atta girl, he winked. We'll call it an agile pivot. That evening, after everyone had cleared out, I stayed behind. I didn't dim the lights, didn't turn on music. I just opened my laptop and created a new page in our internal SharePoint archive. Title, Q4 Procurement Notes. Internal, I made it dry, utterly boring. Buried it in a subfolder within a subfolder labeled Finance Liaisons Legacy Archive. No one would click on it unless they were either very curious or very desperate. Inside, I began logging Brent's decisions. Entry 1, JX Solutions date, Friday requested by Brent Mayfield, amount $2.5 M, due diligence performed, none, legal review, none, procurement justification provided, they're tight with me. SOC2 impact, vendor not listed in existing documentation. No compliance deviation log filed. I attached a scan of the contract draft. I uploaded Brent's Sharpie-scrawled no BS page. I embedded the email thread where I'd asked for a review meeting and been told, verbatim, that's old world thinking. We're not medieval. Then I timestamped it. Version controlled it. Locked editing permissions to myself and the SOC2 compliance bot. I stared at the screen for a long moment before adding a note at the top. This log reflects procedural irregularities observed within Q4 vendor operations. Documentation ongoing, and then I logged out. The next morning, Brent announced in the weekly stand-up that he'd cut through months of bureaucracy with one phone call, and the JX contract was a done deal. He stood there, proud as a toddler holding a drawing made entirely of ketchup. The CEO beamed. Half the room clapped. The other half checked their Slack windows, pretending to be busy. I didn't blink. I just copied the meeting recording into the same hidden folder. Brent didn't even know we auto-recorded now. IT had enabled it last quarter after a data breach scare. He never read that memo either. By lunch, JX was already provisioned into our procurement portal with full access. By dinner, I'd already documented every missing link in their vendor chain. That night, I had a single thought as I stared up at the ceiling. I've seen men like him before, but this one might actually take the whole building down, not on my watch. On a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where even the coffee machine sounded like it needed therapy, I drafted an email to internal audit. No alarms, no flags, just a casual little ping cloaked in hypotheticals. Subject line, quick clarification procurement and SOC2 logging. Body, hi there, hope your week's off to a good start. I had a theoretical question for clarification. Let's say, for example, that a vendor contract exceeding the threshold is executed without full third-party due diligence or legal sign-off. In terms of SOC2, would this require a formal deviation log or secondary attestation, assuming the existing protocol wasn't followed? Appreciate the guidance. Pamela, I read it twice before hitting send, then sat back and watched the rain start to gum up the edge of the window pane. My office faced the back alley behind the Brynwell loading dock. Some folks got mountain views. I got forklift ballet and the occasional raccoon. Still, it beat sharing a wee work with Brent's cologne. The reply came 37 minutes later, dry as dust. From internal audit subject, quick clarification procurement and SOC2 logging. Hi Pamela, per protocol. SOC2 logs must reflect documented compliance with internal procurement procedures. Deviations require attestation by the initiating authority and notification to legal. Let us know if a formal review is required. IA team, that was it. No smiley face. No follow-up. No let us know if this relates to anything specific. Translation? They knew. The phrasing wasn't an answer. It was a warning baked in corporate oatmeal. Weren't about to touch Brent directly. They were handing me the rope and backing away slowly. I clicked out of the email and opened up the Q4 procurement notes, internal, folder. Then I opened my Outlook and dragged every email Brent had sent me about JX Solutions into a new subfolder titled Unlogged Directives. That name sounded boring enough to keep nosy people out. Brent didn't send long emails. He sent bullets. Push this through. Don't loop in legal yet. Can you get this done without the red tape? My favorite was, let's not overcomplicate this with forms. Like forms were barnacles on his speedboat of innovation. Each one got dragged, tagged, and timestamped. Then I opened our SOC2 compliance archive, the one only a handful of people at Brinwell even remembered existed, and began uploading everything one by one. Attachments included meeting summaries, Slack exports, voice memo transcripts. His directive to just use last quarter's vendor form and swap the name out. Like compliance was mad libs. I didn't make noise about it, didn't flag anything. Just slipped each artifact into the archive like dropping pebbles into a well. Plunk, plunk, plunk. That afternoon, Brent barged into my office again, holding his phone like it had personally insulted him. Hey, did you forward our contract summary to legal? He asked. Eyes narrowing. No, I said truthfully. But they'll see it eventually. He scoffed. Eventually's not now. Let's keep momentum. No reason to bring in dead weight. Dead weight. That's what he called legal. The team that kept us out of lawsuits and federal penalties. The department that once saved our ass when a subcontractor turned out to be using high school interns to manage client credentials. Brent saw them as vibe killers. I saw them as the only thing standing between us and a courtroom. Sure, I said, voice smooth as glass. No problem. That night I went home and couldn't taste my dinner. My stomach was doing that low roll it does when your brain is screaming but your mouth hasn't caught up yet. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was scared. Not for me, for the company, for the clients. For the 7 backend systems JX Solutions had been granted administrative access to without a single security review. Brinwell Systems wasn't a lemonade stand. We supported infrastructure for financial firms, healthcare chains, even a federal project I wasn't allowed to name in public. We were the invisible scaffolding for systems people relied on every single day. Brent thought we were a startup. We were closer to a utility. I went back to my laptop. Brent had sent me 3 more emails while I was microwaving leftover chili. One read, loop me out on anything you think is just noise. Another said, can you sign off on the vendor access form? I'll approve it after. The last was just a forwarded NDA from JX's sales lead. No subject line, no comment, just dumped in my inbox like a soggy napkin. I forwarded all 3 into the SOC2 folder. I didn't edit a word. Then I stared at the screen for a long time, remembering something my old manager, Hal, once told me before he retired. Document everything. Doesn't matter how small. If the house burns down, you don't want to be the one holding the match, you want to be the one holding the manual. Well, Hal, I had the manual. And I was making damn sure every page had Brent's fingerprints on it. The call started with a bang. Literally. Brent had knocked over his own coffee on the conference room table, some iced monstrosity he ordered every morning with 4 pumps of vanilla and a dollop of whatever ego tastes like. It bled across the polished wood, soaking into the edge of someone's printout. He waved it off like a champ. Just a little startup energy, folks. I was already bracing for impact. The invite said vendor alignment review, which in Brent speak meant a live demonstration of how little he understood our procurement matrix. Still, I showed up on time, binder in hand, checklist ready, teeth gritted so tight I probably shaved a year off my molars. He clicked on the projector and there it was, JX Solutions Strategic Infrastructure Partner Proposal. Version 4.1. Price tag $4.1 million. I blinked. Brent, last contract for JX you floated was $2.5 million. This version is different. He beamed like a 5-year-old who'd glued macaroni to a Ferrari. Upsell opportunity, he said. They're now providing cross-platform optimization and internal comms overhaul. No scope, no references, no redline review from legal, not even a vendor code assigned. Just a fancy slide deck with stock images of people high-fiving over laptops. I opened my mouth, careful to keep my tone level. We still don't have baseline documentation. No compliance flags cleared, no SOC attestation. They're not even on our W-9 ledger, and that's when he snapped. He stood up, pushed his chair back so hard it hit the wall, and pointed a finger at me like I was a disobedient intern caught stealing printer ink. This is my department now, he barked. I don't need your permission. We're not wasting time with your paper trails and fear-based thinking. The room froze. No one looked at me, not HR, not operations, not even Raj from security who usually winked at me during tense meetings. Everyone just stared at the table or their hands, waiting for the storm to move on. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I just stared at Brent, took a breath, and clicked record on my phone, still inside my bag on the floor. If Brent was going to crash this company into the side of a mountain, I'd at least keep the black box intact. When the meeting ended, he gave me one final command as he walked out. Get JX greenlit by Friday, or I'll escalate. Escalate to who? His father-in-law, the CEO who gifted him a C-suite title like it was a Christmas stocking stuffer? I picked up the soaked handout, tossed it in the bin, and went back to my desk. I opened the call transcript app, yes. I had one and uploaded the audio. Then I dropped it in the Q4 procurement notes internal folder. I logged it like always. Entry 14, JX Solutions Expansion Proposal Date, Tuesday, initiated by Brent Mayfield, proposal change, increase from $2.5M to $4.1M, documentation status. None, third-party verification. None, legal sign-off, not requested. Notes, Brent quote during call, we're not wasting time with your paper trails. I locked the file. I backed it up to an offline drive. I didn't even blink. The turning point came 3 days later via a message from Erica in legal. Simple subject line, JX procurement, no body text. Just a calendar invite attached for a quick sync. When I joined the video call, Erica looked tired. Kind of tired that happens when your inbox is full of landmines and you're out of boots. Hey Pamela, she started, just a quick question. I was reviewing some access logs and noticed JX was provisioned last week. We don't have any review files, references, NDA, or compliance triggers. Is something missing from the tracker? I sipped my coffee. It had gone cold. Nope, I said, nothing's missing. She blinked. Sorry, what I mean is, why don't we have anything? I leaned in. Calm, professional, controlled, ask Brent, I said. Silence. She blinked again, slower this time, copy that. The call ended 2 minutes later. No follow-up, no legalese, just a not-so-subtle quiet that settled like dust on a crime scene. By Friday, JX was embedded in 3 of our back-end systems. Still no signed contract on file, no due diligence. Brent had roared ahead like a golden retriever on a sugar high, oblivious to every protocol he trampled on. He even had the gall to post on LinkedIn, agility bureaucracy. Proud to push boundaries at Brinwell Systems. #disruptor, #leadership. I didn't like where this was headed, but I wasn't scared anymore, because now I wasn't just documenting mistakes. I was documenting evidence. Company-wide Slack alert dropped at 9:06 a.m. SOC 2 audit window begins 10/2. Please prepare documentation packets by EOD Friday. I stared at it for a full 30 seconds. Let it sink in like whiskey into old wood. My heart didn't race. No panic, just a cold, quiet pulse beneath the surface. It was happening. The audit was coming, and Brent's entire circus act was about to be dragged into the light. I looked up from my screen. Across the office, Brent was mid-strut, holding a protein shake like a trophy. Auditors love me, he declared to no one in particular. I know how to talk their language. Their language? Brent couldn't even pronounce at a station without tripping over the vowels. The man once called SOC2 some glorified IT thing in a budget meeting. Now he was convinced he could charm his way past a compliance analyst with a smile and a buzzword salad. What he didn't know, what no one had told him, was that this year's inspector wasn't just any contractor. Brinwell's board had quietly hired someone special. Someone they called the Hammer in a cardigan, retired FBI, 15 years in cybercrime, famous in internal circles for reading every word, every log, every timestamp. And now he was coming for us. I closed Slack, opened my documentation binder. 13 years of working at Brinwell had taught me one thing. Auditors don't care how loud you talk. They care about what's written down, what's signed, what's timestamped, what's missing. I flipped open my private log, Q4 procurement notes, internal. It was time. I started compiling, entry by entry, every skipped vetting, every signature Brent never got, every email where he wrote, don't loop in legal yet, every Slack message where he said, just do it under my name, every Zoom call where his video was off but his directives were loud and clear. I don't care about protocols, move it forward. I included metadata exports, version histories, screenshots of his approval edits, sloppily added in Google Docs like he thought the suggestion mode was an eraser. Vendor contact sheets that were blank except for a Gmail address and a first name. JX Solutions had been provisioned into our system with full API access and zero security review. That alone was a bomb. But Brent hadn't stopped there. There were at least 4 more vendors, less flashy but just as unvetted, pushed through under the radar. One of them had a revoked business license in Utah. Another had a website that hadn't been updated since Obama's first term. I didn't editorialize, I didn't speculate, I just assembled the facts. Line by line, quiet as snowfall. By Thursday, my packet was 172 pages. I labeled it, Operations Procurement Overview SOC2 Review Packet, authored by Pamela C. Benson. I printed 3 hard copies, spiral-bound, one for compliance, one for the inspector, and one for me. Just before closing my laptop for the night, I dropped a digital copy into the SOC2 drive, using the exact naming convention required for traceability. I tagged it with the audit window timestamp. Brent wouldn't know how to even find that folder. Hell, he probably thought SOC2 was a password tier. At 5:41 p.m., my email pinged. Subject, Audit Welcome Brief Inspector Assignment Body. Your assigned SOC2 Field Inspector will be Robert H. Dennings. Please ensure your department materials are ready for review by Monday morning. Inspector Dennings is authorized to request full access to procurement and operations documentation. Robert H. Dennings, I knew that name. In 2017, he caught a $9M financial leak at a government contractor in Delaware using nothing but printer logs and a single deleted spreadsheet. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make demands, he just read. Everything, and Brent was walking into that boardroom with a firecracker taped to a pile of gasoline-soaked contracts, and he didn't even know it. Friday morning, Brent walked by my desk with a grin so wide it looked stapled to his face. "Hope you didn't overdo it," he said, motioning toward the binder. "No need to overwhelm the guy. Trust me, these audits are a formality." I smiled without showing teeth. "Mine's ready." He winked. "I'm just gonna freestyle it. Auditors appreciate confidence." He walked away, and I didn't look back. I just reached into my desk drawer, pulled out my hard copy, and placed it gently into a sealed manila envelope. The label on the front was handwritten, clean block letters. SOC 2 procurement documentation operations submitted 9/29P. Benson. I placed it into the outgoing bin, and then I went back to my desk to wait, because now the floor was his. And the fall, that was coming fast. Monday morning cracked open like a dead light bulb, burnt out, cold, buzzing at the edges. At exactly 8:59 a.m., the glass doors of Brinwell Systems parted and in walked Robert H. Dennings. No fanfare, no badge lanyard. Just a plain gray suit, black notebook, and an expression carved from granite. He looked like the guy who'd ask for your mother's maiden name, recite your childhood address back to you, and then casually mention your mortgage rate. I watched from the corner of the operations suite as he gave a firm nod to the receptionist and made his way to Conference 2B, where Brent had already stationed himself like a game show host waiting for lights and applause. Brent had upgraded his wardrobe for the occasion: new blazer, designer sneakers, a dress shirt buttoned just low enough to show a hint of desperation. The table was cluttered with branded notebooks, water bottles, and a comically large poster titled Procurement Agility, Reinventing Pipelines. Dennings didn't blink. "Let's begin," he said. "No pleasantries, no icebreakers, just a chair pulled out, a notebook opened, and a pen clicked." Brent launched into his one-man show. "Welcome to Brinwell," he boomed. "We're a hybrid lean enterprise redefining vendor velocity through adaptive frameworks." I could feel my soul physically trying to escape my body. Brent continued, flinging words like confetti at a wedding no one wanted to attend. "Our procurement evolution is less about red tape, more about transformation. We believe in decision decentralization and maximizing trust bandwidth." Dennings gave no reaction, not even a squint. He just tapped his pen 3 times and said flatly, "Pamela Benson?" I straightened my posture. "Yes, sir. You prepared the operations procurement documentation?" "I did." "Binder, please." I reached into my bag and slid it across the table, a slim, black folder. No frills, no logos, just clean weight in the hands of a man who understood the gravity of documentation. On top was a single yellow sticky note: "See version history." Dennings peeled it off, nodded once, and opened the binder. The room changed temperature. He didn't start from the top. He flipped straight to the index, scanned the headers, and went hunting, like a bloodhound in a library. After maybe 60 seconds, he landed where I knew he would. Paragraph 3, Section B, he read aloud. His voice didn't rise, it didn't falter, it just echoed with the weight of impending consequence. Brent's eyes narrowed. "Sorry, which section is that?" he asked, doing a piss-poor job of hiding the twitch at his jawline. Dennings didn't answer. He just turned the binder around so it faced Brent. His finger landed on the bold text. "All vendor contracts exceeding $500,000 must include documented third-party verification, financial health analysis, and signed attestation by the procurement officer. Any deviation from this protocol must be accompanied by a compliance deviation log, approved by legal, and co-signed by the director of operations." Brent blinked. The room went very quiet. I kept my expression neutral. Calm silence masking satisfaction, like a chess player watching her opponent finally realize he'd been in check for the last 12 moves. Dennings turned back to me. "Can you confirm this is current policy?" "Yes," I replied. "It was last ratified 12 months ago. Approved by legal, signed by the CFO and board rep. Version histories on the last tab," he nodded. "And this policy applies to all vendor engagements exceeding $500,000? "Yes, sir." Brent leaned forward, trying to insert himself back into the narrative. "Look, we've modernized some of those flows. We're not necessarily stuck to every legacy process." Dennings cut him off without raising his voice. "Mr. Mayfield, did you initiate the JX Solutions contract?" Brent paused. His mouth opened, then closed. "Well, I mean, yes, I quarterbacked that one. Was there a third-party financial health analysis?" "We moved fast on that one. They came highly recommended. No documentation in the packet." "Right, well, it was a relationship deal. You know, modern procurement's about trust. No signed attestation found in version history. We were going to retroactively formalize some of that." "Legal cosign?" Brent gave a weird half-shrug, half-nod. "Not formally, but it was, like, broadly understood." Dennings didn't even bother to look up from his notes. "Noted," he said. I felt my pulse slow. Just a notch, nothing dramatic. But he wasn't done. He flipped to the audit submission history in the SOC2 platform, automatically populated by our compliance software. Every override Brent had initiated, every skipped flag, Every field left blank, time-stamped with his name right there in the metadata. He looked up. "These are all your entries," he asked Brent. Brent looked pale now. "I mean, it's a team effort," Dennings turned back to me. "Miss Benson, yes. Thank you for including version control logs." I nodded once. "Of course." He clicked his pen closed. The sound echoed in the conference room like a gunshot muffled in velvet. Then he said something I'll never forget. "This paragraph," he said, tapping 3B, "is the reason I don't take buzzwords seriously." Wednesday, 9:02 a.m., boardroom C. The air felt pressurized, like the walls were leaning in just a little. Just enough to make sure you didn't forget where you were. Polished glass, leather chairs, half-drunk espressos sweating in paper cups. The board was gathered. Legal, compliance. Our CFO, who looked like he'd rather be hiding in a supply closet. And Brent, hair perfectly sculpted, shirt collar a little too open, jaw set like he was trying to intimidate the concept of accountability. Robert H. Dennings stood at the head of the table, still in his gray suit, still emotionless. He didn't introduce himself again, didn't waste anyone's time. He just opened the binder and flipped to the page like he was turning a Bible to Revelation. "Before we move forward," he said, "I'd like to revisit a specific section of the procurement protocol." He held up the binder, flipped a few more pages, paused. Paragraph 3, Section B, and then he turned his gaze slowly, almost theatrically, toward Brent. "Mr. Mayfield," he said, "would you mind reading it aloud for the room?" You could hear the fluorescent lights hum. Brent shifted in his chair, his confident facade cracking just enough to betray the nerves underneath. Sure," he said, reaching for the binder like it was made of hot iron. He cleared his throat. "All vendor contracts exceeding," his voice caught. He started again. "All vendor contracts exceeding $500,000 must include documented third-party verification." He glanced up. Everyone was staring. No one blinking. No one saving him. "Financial health analysis and signed attestation by the procurement officer." Any deviation, his eyes flicked back down to the page. I watched the sweat bead at his temple. "From this protocol must be accompanied by a compliance deviation log, approved by legal and co-signed by the Director of Operations." The room went still. No coughs, no fidgeting, just the sound of Brent's pride wheezing under the weight of consequence. Dennings took the binder back. "Thank you," he said flatly. Then he pulled out a tablet, tapped a few times, turned the screen to face the room. "Now let's look at the attestation logs." The display showed the audit trail from our SOC2 platform, version controlled, immutable. A long list of entries appeared, each with a digital signature. Brent's name dotted every override entry for JX Solutions, time-stamped, IP logged, cross-referenced. "Let's start with this one," Dennings said, pointing. "Contract ID JX 4213, date September 12th. No verification submitted, no deviation log," and here he tapped again, enlarging the metadata, signed and authorized by Mr. Mayfield. Brent's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked at the CEO, then at the CFO, then at legal. They all stared back like he'd just declared he never learned to read. "Another one," Dennings continued. "JX 4214. No financials. No legal review, same signature." Brent tried to speak. There was urgency, all right. It was a strategic pivot." Dennings didn't blink. "Was the deviation protocol followed? I thought we had an informal understanding." "Operational discretion. No deviation log exists. No co-signature from the Director of Operations. You authorized it unilaterally." "I didn't think that is clear," Dennings said. The board member closest to me folded her hands and leaned back, eyes locked on Brent like she was watching a car accident in slow motion. The CEO, silent until now, shifted in his seat, exhaled hard through his nose and rubbed his temple with two fingers. His jaw was clenched. He didn't defend Brent. He didn't say a word because there was nothing to say. Dennings turned back to the binder and flipped to the signature page. "Initial policy ratification includes signatures from legal, the CFO, and the board. Updates to policy are reviewed quarterly. This paragraph, paragraph 3, section B, has not changed in 3 years." He let the silence hang. "Mr. Mayfield, did you review the procurement protocol upon assuming your position?" Brent's voice came out thin. "I skimmed it." "Then perhaps that explains your current predicament." Brent looked like a man who'd just been handed a mirror after denying he had spinach in his teeth for hours, only to realize it wasn't spinach. It was blood. Dennings nodded once. "I'll be including this finding in the preliminary report." He turned toward me. "Miss Benson, your documentation was comprehensive. It allowed us to trace each violation without ambiguity." I nodded. "I follow the checklist." The CEO closed his eyes for a second too long, like he was hoping to disappear and reappear in a better reality. The unraveling had begun. Public, slow, surgical, and no one reached to stop it. Dennings didn't move like a man trying to make a point. He moved like a man who already had, and now he was just collecting receipts. He stood at the end of the table, tablet in one hand, stylus in the other, as the SOC2 platform loaded on the wall-mounted screen. The room's lights dimmed slightly, and the display snapped into focus. A scrolling timeline of entries lit up, each one a breadcrumb in a trail Brent hadn't realized he was leaving. "Let's talk about signature history," Dennings said. Calm, precise, no judgment in his voice, just quiet accountability. He tapped into the filter options and selected Procurement Division Q3 Q4. Pamela C. Benson, 47 entries, all green, all fully documented, each with corresponding third-party attachments, legal cosigns, and matching timestamps between draft, review, and approval. Brent Mayfield, 19 entries, 6 missing attachments, 4 without legal flagging, 11 with override, unauthorized deviation automatically applied by the platform. The wall glowed green on one side, red and yellow on the other. The room said nothing, but the silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, the kind that made people shift in their seats and reevaluate their proximity to the blast radius. Dennings zoomed in on entry hash 1417, the infamous JX Solutions contract. This override was executed at 9:13 p.m. on a Sunday. No supporting documentation, no legal notification, no cosign from operations. The attestation reads, approved, pushing forward. He turned slowly and looked directly at Brent. Mr. Mayfield, can you confirm this was your action? Brent swallowed hard. Yes, but I was told we could expedite for strategic needs. Who told you that? Brent hesitated. It was an operational understanding. His eyes scanned the room. Then, desperate, he turned toward me. Well, Pamela didn't raise objections at the time, he said, voice too high, too quick. She didn't flag anything. She was supposed to manage documentation. If there were missing steps, that's on her right. My face didn't move, no smirk, no frown, just a stillness sharpened by months of patience. I slid the folder across the table. Inside was the full email thread, timestamps, threaded replies, subject line concern re JX contract approval missing due diligence. Sent to Brent, CC'd to legal, forwarded to our general counsel, flagged high importance. His response, still visible in bold, this is my call, I'll take responsibility. I didn't say a word, the paper did all the speaking. The legal rep leaned in and adjusted his glasses. The board member closest to him gave a low, skeptical exhale. Another board member, Janice, a senior partner who usually spoke only when the coffee was wrong, leaned forward with a single, slow question. You signed off on these without any review? Brent's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Not immediately. When he did speak, it was hollow. I thought the urgency outweighed the you thought, Janice repeated, voice like steel wool. That's not how compliance works. Brent looked around the room for backup. His father-in-law, the CEO, didn't meet his gaze. He just stared down at his notepad as if perhaps the meaning of life was scribbled between his margin doodles. The CFO was doing his best impersonation of a stone gargoyle. No one was going to save him. Dennings tapped once more. Final point. Our data confirms that Miss Benson's entries were created in real time, with no post-facto edits. Mr. Mayfield's entries, however, he enlarged a timestamp log, were modified post-submission on multiple occasions. Last edit, 3 days after access was already granted to JX Solutions' backend team. The room went still again. No coughing, no chair squeaks, just the click of the stylus against the tablet as Dennings marked something down. Then, as if it were the most casual thing in the world, he said, we'll be circulating the draft report to executive leadership for signature. Full findings. Section 3 violations. Internal accountability mapping. That was the setup. The kill shot wasn't in the room yet, but it was coming, like thunder after a lightning flash. Dennings didn't slam a gavel. He didn't raise his voice. He just packed up his tablet, nodded once to the room, and said, I appreciate your transparency. Proceed accordingly. As he left, I gathered my binder. Brent looked over at me, his face a mix of panic and betrayal, like I'd tripped him in a race he didn't realize had started months ago. I gave him the same unreadable look I'd given every man like him before, and I walked out silent. The truth was in the logs, and the logs didn't lie. Thursday, 10:47 a.m. The final audit debrief. It felt less like a meeting and more like a sentencing. The temperature in the boardroom had dropped 5 degrees, or maybe that was just the blood draining from Brent's face, as the last page of the audit draft slid across the table toward the CEO. Robert H. Dennings stood at the head again, posture unchanged, eyes locked on no one and everyone all at once. The binder was closed now, its work done. He began without flair, without drama. Just precision. Concluded our audit review for the Procurement and Vendor Management Division. He tapped the cover of the report. All records, source documents, and digital logs were verified. Policy protocols cross-checked against the current compliance charter. No one breathed. Brent didn't blink. Dennings continued. Your procurement lead initiated multiple high-value contracts without meeting the requirements outlined in paragraph 3, section B. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. These contracts must be flagged as non-compliant. Their execution circumvented due diligence, lacked legal oversight, and were approved without proper co-signature. Brent's face was already a different color, somewhere between wallpaper paste and regret. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His fingers hovered above the table like he wanted to point or wave or deflect, but the weight of the room held him in place. The CEO didn't speak, stared at the report. His jaw locked so tight I could see the muscle twitching just beneath his temple. He wasn't surprised, just cornered by the son-in-law he'd installed like a screensaver and by the policies he'd clearly never thought would bite back. Then, like clockwork, Dennings delivered the final lines. There's no attestation record, there's no deviation log, there's no co-signature. This is a material violation of internal protocol. Section B was ignored. He turned to me. Miss Benson, your submissions were complete and reflected full compliance. We thank you. I gave a single nod, no smile, no smirk. Just the stillness I'd carried through every ignored warning, every overwritten directive, every meeting where I'd been talked over like a broken speakerphone. In front of me was the SOC2 platform, still open on my laptop. The audit draft was ready, verified, finalized, without ceremony. I moved my cursor to the button at the bottom of the screen. Submit final record. I clicked. The record locked. Immutable, tamper-proof, review complete. A few seconds of silence passed, thick as cement. Then the CEO finally looked at Brent, not with anger, not with compassion. Just a long, slow stare of corporate calculus, the moment when a liability becomes a number on a risk chart. He turned to HR. Do you mind asking Mr. Mayfield to step out for an internal discussion? The HR lead didn't flinch. She stood, nodded once, and gestured toward the door. Brent's chair scraped against the floor. The sound echoed like a siren. He hesitated, looked around, still waiting for someone to speak up, still clinging to the faint, childish hope that nepotism might save him one last time. But no one moved, not legal, not the CFO, not the board, not me. He left quietly. The door clicked shut behind him. I gathered my things. As I exited, my email pinged. From Robert H. Dennings, subject, submission, impeccable work. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The protocol had spoken for me. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.